AMD just dropped the AMD Fluid Motion Frames 2 technical preview. It's now available. I went through the hassle of like side loading or whatever, force uploading my drivers so that I could use this. And let me tell you, if I wasn't a believer in the ROG Ally X, well, now I am. Fluid Motion Frames 2 is like having FSR 3 on everything and anything. I'm gonna jump in a few different games and show you how insane this is, how much better the second gen looks, and it can even work on emulation. So I'll show you a little bit of a game that we will not speak of with an emulator that we will not utter. Rest in peace. At 80 plus frames per second is as glorious as it sounds. If you're interested in doing this, I saw like a few people showing this off, and then I went to try to install it from this page. It is not that straightforward, but I did find this incredible step-by-step guide that I followed, and it worked perfectly. So I'm gonna link both of these links below. I hold no responsibility if you break or brick your brand new Ally X. All right, without any further delay, we're gonna jump in and test out some games. So when you update, you'll see that the current version has been updated. And now I'm running on this new one. Then when you go into gaming, but now you see that AMD Fluid Motion Frames 2. I have it enabled, search mode is high, and set to performance. I'm using the anti-log, and I'm also using super resolution, and my sharpness is at 75. So we're gonna be playing the game at 720p, and it's gonna upscale it to 1080p. Now we're gonna jump in and see the glory. As the game is loading in, we can make sure that all of our settings are set correctly. I'm plugged into power, so we're doing the 30 watt maxed out mode. So this is going to be best case scenario, but we're at that 720, 120 frames per second, CPU boost off, everything looks great. You have to be in full screen mode. I'm at 720, so it's going to upscale it, and these are all my settings. A lot of high, mediums, and a few low. You can know that it's working because the frame gen lag shows up. And now we're only getting 15 milliseconds. This was way more than that on the first gen. They have decreased the lag so much, and it's so much better and so much more usable. And look at that frame rate, 90 plus frames per second. And it legit looks so awesome. It's so cool to be able to play Elden Ring at above that 60 frames per second, not to mention way over 60 frames per second on a handheld device. That's ridiculous. There's no reason that I'm going to be playing games like Elden Ring, like an RPG adventure game where you're running around. It's not like a first-person shooter where that lag might matter. This, I'm always gonna play with this on. And the upscaler is phenomenal too. It's hard to describe through the screen, through the camera, but believe me, it's looking pretty dang nice. If you would have told me a year ago that we would have been seeing almost 100 frames per second on a handheld, even with things like FSR 3 on Elden Ring, I would have been like, yeah, but it's probably just gonna be janky and not look good, because that's what we've experienced. It performs great, but if you're looking for the best way to enjoy all your games, the Viture PRO XR glasses are the way to go. 1080p, 120 hertz, super bright, and if you buy them, use my code Joshua Gray and you'll get 10% off all the accessories, and I get a kickback, which helps me make more of these types of videos.
And now back to our program.
So we can toggle it off by going Alt R, which unfortunately also makes me use one of my potions. And as you can see, we're still, it's still Windows and it's still janky. That's supposed to pull up. It's not even here. Okay, it should have just thrown us back into here. And then I'm going to turn it off. And then Alt-R. So now, as you can see, when it's off, we're getting in the mid 50s, staying above 50 frames per second, which is why it's actually looking pretty good. You can't just, get 20 frames per second and hope that this is going to magically look good and let you play at 60. But if you're getting above 45 into the 60s, then the frame gen works really well. But you can see right where it goes frame gen lag, it says NA. That's because it is not on right now. So that's a good indicator that it's not on. And then, hypothetically, we should be able to go Alt-R, and it should jump into the software in where we could turn it back on. But again, it's really struggling with life right now. We're back in business. It's back on. I feel like we just lost 10 frames per second in between that mishap. There we go. Maybe it just needed a second. 100 frames per second. If you want to cheat, you can just look at the sky. Get 115 frames per second. Incredible. We're jumping into the Witcher 3. Again, still at that turbo 30 watt, 720p, 120 hertz. We're using the super resolution, which is upscaling the 720 to 1080p. Fluid Motion Frames 2. High performance. In that full screen mode, 720, 120. We're gonna go with high preset settings. Everything's set to high. You can see in the corner there, frame gen lag is just at 7 milliseconds right now. Let's see how well that can hold up when we get into the game. And now we have The Witcher playing at 115 frames per second on a handheld. And it looks so good. It's ridiculous. We just made a video testing this out on the ROG Ally. So if you wanted to check it out without all of these settings, and I went through low, medium, high, ultra ray tracing every single setting, again, without using the fluid motion, this is with it. And the difference is immense. Like I was saying when I was playing Elden Ring, I just don't see a world in which I will not be using these settings. I also feel really bad because why would I pick up the OLED Steam Deck to play this game when I can play it at over 100 frames per second and it looks this good and plays this good? Guys, this is the future. This isn't even the released version. This will only get better from here. I've never been too big of a fan of these frame gen things because they always seem so janky. But this has been very impressive. And man, it's kind of a game changer, not gonna lie. I wonder when, if, how this is gonna get implemented on the Steam Deck. It's a little bit more difficult though, because the Steam Deck isn't polling like 60 frames per second at these settings. So it wouldn't be able to just magically go, to 120 and look good. It would still be helpful. I would still love a system-wide ability to essentially just like click on FSR 3 in any game I want. Okay, we need to just jump in to ultra settings and see how well that looks. All right, ultra 90 plus frames per second. At ultra, this is so ridiculous. It looks so good. 120 frames per second. Yeah, this is staying above 90 frames per second at ultra settings I'm so impressed with the upscaler. It really actually makes a huge difference. And it turns 720p into something that looks much better. And a lot of the times we're playing these games on this little screen at 720 so that we can get better performance anyways. I haven't noticed any like dip in frames per second using it. So it must not be that taxing on the system to turn it on and use it. And the difference you get in quality is so noticeable. I also don't know why I wouldn't be using it. I even used it the other day when I was setting this all up on my 4K monitor, and I upscaled 1080p to 4K on Elden Ring. And it was just crazy. With no external GPU, I can play that game at over 60 frames per second, full 1080p, and it upscales it to 4K. I mean, what more could we want, guys? I mean, everything. We could want everything. Just give it all to us. But yeah, I'm super impressed with this. If you've got the Ally, I just don't know why you would wait, other than if you're worried about, you know, messing up your whole system, force installing a driver. And I'm, you know, not good enough with all this stuff to tell you that you should do that or shouldn't. I'm just showing you that it's making a huge difference. Okay, we're gonna try Alt-R, and we're gonna try to shut it off. That is what's supposed to happen. So right here, it tells us that it is taking the 720 and it is upscaling it to 1080. Wonderful. But we're just gonna turn this little bad boy off. Jump back in the game. See, now we're getting that 49 frames per second. It's like really locked in at 49. But yeah, as you can see, massive difference. This takes it from, you know, not even 60 frames per second to 100. That's just ridiculous. I mean, this is impressive that it's playing at 45 at Ultra. Pretty crazy. Yeah, this ROG Ally X, kinda legit, guys. Now, we're gonna play some Tears of the Kingdom on Yuzu at 720p, upscale to 1080, with Fluid Motion Frames 2 enabled. This, my friends, is a game changer. But we gotta jump in the game to really know how this is gonna perform. Right as Yuzu was making huge progress in optimizing these games on handheld devices like this, they got cut short, to put it nicely. And so we were left with something that runs actually fairly well on the Steam Deck, but it didn't get as much time and optimization on the Ally. And so typically the performance isn't that much better from the OLED Steam Deck to the Ally. But now, being able to force the Fluid Motion Frame Gen version 2 on any app you want, so now we're getting almost 60 frames per second when we're running around outside in the world. What it will not fix is all the micro stutters and when it's loading cachers and stuff like that. I haven't played this very much on this device, so I have not compiled a large library, so it's gonna every once in a while have a huge spike. That's not really something we can fix. And the longer you play this game, the better that's going to perform. Also, I was trying it out on Ryujinx, since, you know, that's kind of our option now, and it was just useless. There's just so many glitches, and it wasn't performing very good at all, so I just gave up on that. And then went on my other PC, grabbed my old Yuzu, and dumped it on here, and everything worked flawlessly right away. I just want to make sure that we are playing at 720p, giving us that, yep. CPU boost can be helpful on emulation because it's CPU heavy. I'd be really interested to see after like hours and hours of gameplay how smooth of a performance we could get on this device like this. Because already above 45 frames per second is pretty dang awesome. We can try shutting it off so I can show you what performance we are getting without using Fluid Motion 2. So without it, we're not even hitting 30 frames per second. Jumping from mid-20s to 40 frames per second. But yeah, without it, as you can see, I mean, we're jumping all over the place. 20 frames, up to above 30. But if we jump back in, go back and enable it, it'll do its thing. Bam. Now we're getting 50 to 60. So on those hard to emulate games, upscaling the 720 to 1080p and being able to add Fluid Motion Frame Gen 2 is kind of awesome. Where this really shines is obviously if we jump into a shrine. The shrines are notoriously much easier to run on these emulators, well, just in the game in general, because we're not in the open world. And so this really shows off like the best case scenario when utilizing this technology on this device. And let me tell you, playing Tears of the Kingdom on a handheld at 80 plus frames per second is as glorious as it sounds. It's just never looked this good on a device that you hold in your hands. 90 frames per second. If only we could get that in the outside world. This would be insane. If nothing else, this is just showing us a little glimpse of what the future holds for handheld devices. We're gonna get these bigger batteries inside these tiny little devices, and they're just gonna get more powerful with the chipsets. But then they're also going to make software like this that actually functions really, really well. And when you combine all of that together, we're gonna have these insanely powerful gaming devices in our bag. Make sure to subscribe. We are on the march to 10,000 subscribers. Leave me a comment, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.